All right, well, welcome to the Sports Guys, another edition. This time we come to you with a mid-tournament update. It's been an incredible tournament so far, some really good games. We've also had some stinkers. There have been actually a lot of teams that got blown out. It really feels, Robbie, in some ways like a kind of early season basketball or early college football season football. In a lot of ways, some of the games have been really not very competitive, but there have been a couple really good ones, and we'll talk about those tonight. How you doing?
I'm doing well, doing really well. Glad to be talking about some basketball.
What have you thought of the tournament so far?
I think it's been pretty good. Very few upsets and no advancement of the mid majors. But I think that I like the offense a lot, and I think that they've been pretty relatively high scoring and good action.
So
I
you
think they're pretty good teams.
So you and I have a theory that we disagree on, and so I want to put it out there for all of our listeners tonight. We would love for you to drop us a comment. Rob's theory is that what people really want to see is the blue blood programs playing each other, especially from now until the end of the tournament. That's what the ratings show. That's what everybody wants. That's what the NCAA wants, and I know that. I know that's what the NCAA wants. My theory is that what creates huge ratings is the casual fan who may not have even seen a college basketball game the whole season, but only watches in the playoffs. And those people want upsets. Those people want to see UMBC beat Virginia. They want to see those types of upsets. And what we're seeing is with NIL, with the transfer portal, you're seeing a concentration of power at the top of the major conferences, and you're seeing fewer and fewer mid majors able to compete. That's what I'm observing. And
Yeah.
so our theory is I think one way and you think the other. And so I'm really interested to see what our listeners think. So definitely drop us a
So let
comment.
me
What's your theory?
characterize the way I say it a little differently. I absolutely believe that upsets are what make March Madness amazing. However, the first two rounds is where you want that to happen. You don't care if your number one seed gets knocked out. Your bracket doesn't exist anyway after the first weekend. So basically, every single bracket's been eliminated now, etc. But you don't want Florida Gulf Coast going through into the Elite Eight or the Final Four and getting annihilated by a big time program. So what you want is Florida Gulf Coast to go on and beat a Kentucky in the first round and have it be some massive 15-2 upset. But then when it settles down into the second weekend, you want to start having the good teams in there for the ratings and for the intrigue. Nobody wants to see a big time team blow out a lesser team that got lucky once. And so for the ideal is to have, if you have no upsets in the beginning, it's not as exciting of a March Madness as it could be. And then if you don't have the good teams go through to the finals, then it's not as good as it could be. So it has to turn and pivot as the tournament goes on.
I think you have some regular fans that'll peel off if you don't have the blue bloods, but I think you'll have casual fans peel off if you don't have the upset specials. And when I say that, what I mean is like the year that George Mason went to the Final Four, it was a humongous story. It got on 60 Minutes. Like it was just, they couldn't stop talking about it. And it just got so much notoriety. And then everybody was rooting for George Mason. Of course, they lost in the Final Four, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you want to get the hardcore fans who are going to watch anyway? You know they're going to watch anyway. It's the Final Four. Or do you want to get the casual fans that boost your numbers?
Let me put it to you this way. There's no question that while the Cinderella team is in there, St. Mary's, Florida Gulf Coast, George Mason,
VCU.
Mm-hmm. Those teams keep the cool storylines going. So you think about it all week and then you're excited. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the Sweet 16, you don't want to see Florida Gulf Coast play against VCU. You know those are not the two best teams in the country. It's not very compelling. You're probably going to turn it off at halftime if you ever watch it at all. You need to draw them in. It's got to be Duke, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. It's got to be something that's got some weight to it. That's what's going to make most people tune in. The average casual fan is loving to see the big upsets in the beginning, but they're not going to tune in if it's a nothing thing. So the bottom line is, it's very exciting to have the upsets. It's what makes March Madness special. 64 teams playing their hearts out, teams you've never heard of playing the big guys, and the ones you've never heard of have a legitimate shot at winning in a one-game, win or go home scenario. But as the tournament wears on and depth becomes an issue and teams get tired, etc., the good teams always win, like later into the tournament. So that's the good thing. When they don't win, viewership goes down. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that I don't want upsets. I do. I want to see all the brackets annihilated in the first 2 days. but then I want to see it settle down into logical basketball where the talented players go on. I want to see Janae Broom against Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
I
That
get
would be amazing, compelling basketball in a tournament. So
There's no doubt.
yes, upsets are important, but I think when they happen is important.
So there were no perfect brackets out of 40 million after the first weekend of the tournament. And the reason that is, I believe, is that everybody's trying to pick the upsets. And what's happening is they're overdoing it. They're picking too many upsets. What I did was the opposite this year. I ended up picking almost all favorites. And because I did that, I had two perfect regions coming out of the weekend.
Yeah.
So, it's not very brave or anything like that. I'm just saying it just seems like the Blue Bloods are winning more than they used to.
They, of course, call that chalk, and you can go with chalk and be safe. However, you're always going to miss something because there's always an upset or two that throw it all upside down. So if you're going for a perfect bracket, you really have to pick a couple upsets. Now, the level of upset can be different. Some tournaments have been crazy. There's just upsets everywhere. And then some tournaments is like this one where the Blue Bloods are going through. This is actually a dream tournament for the television stations.
Mm-hmm. I picked a couple upsets. I picked Grand Canyon over Maryland, and of course it didn't work out. So I think I did maybe 3 major upsets, and I was 0 for 3 on all 3 of them. And so I don't know.
And that's the funny part, is you always look silly when you take that stretch and you try and hit that upset and they get blown out and you're like, whoops, I shouldn't have thought, that team could beat that team. And I really didn't. I just thought for some reason they were going to catch them on that night. But when you nail an upset, that feels good. That feels good. So
no doubt. It's been fun so far. There's some good games that we need to talk about. And obviously we're going to go through some of the blowouts too. We are going to go through every single score coming out of the round of 32. And then we're going to talk about some of the big headlines that came out of this weekend. But any other impressions you got coming out of the weekend?
I think the tournament's been pretty nice and high scoring. Defense has not been super, super intense. So it's kind of nice to watch.
It's looking more and more like the NBA, doesn't
like
it?
the pros.
You're getting 90 to 86. You're getting 94 to 83.
It's certainly different. It's certainly different than the NBA, but it's not 42 to 38,
Yeah, but those halves are a lot shorter. So you have to think if they played a full half,
true,
NBA half, it would be 120 to 110.
Or 100 to 90 or something. Yeah. So, that's what I've observed is I've liked the offenses, and watching the Blue Bloods go through, and the NIL is clearly affecting the mid-major teams. I think they're going to have to think about this. Is this really what we want? Or do we want to come up with a system that's maybe a little more equitable to create some parity? Because if you go the direction we're going here and the number of upsets starts dropping in the first 2 rounds down to almost 0, you're going to lose a lot of the magic of March Madness. The word madness insinuates anything can happen. And if that's not true, that hurts the tournament.
One thing I really did like was the regular season's meaning more and more. The seeding is meaning more and more. I mean, UNC gets into the play-in game. They did win the play-in game, but then they got absolutely destroyed on the weekend. And is because they didn't have a very good team this year and they barely got in. And the other teams who've gotten down, 11 seeds, 10 seeds, those kind of things, they really struggle because they're playing a pretty decent mid team. Whereas if you really bust your butt in the regular season, you go ahead and get your number 3, number 2 seed, you've got a pretty easy path to the Sweet 16. So I like that. I really like that the regular season really means something.
Yeah.
So I think they've done a good job. They really seeded well this year, I think, in this tournament. I'm really impressed.
I'm really a little sad overall because I think the ACC needs to be one of the top 2 conferences. To watch the NIL money totally dictate where the talent is, I don't find it to be an acceptable position for the long run. I think there has to be some kind of profit sharing or some kind of not profit sharing, but salary cap type things. There's got to be some limits that make sense. Otherwise, the mid majors are going to go away, and the magic of this tournament is going to dwindle down. And you might as well knock it from 64 teams down to about 24.
It's not going to be March Madness, and it'll be March predictable.
It'll be March,
Yeah.
see you at Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, and that's when it's going to get good, kind of thing.
It's still going to be great basketball. It's just not going to have the same, madness that we've been used to and the craziness,
right?
Especially if weekend 1.
VCU will have no chance against Florida. You know what I mean? In the future, if this continues.
That's right. Well, it's interesting. What's happened is all these teams now have all got general managers, football and basketball. As a matter of fact, you saw yesterday, Andrew Luck made his first action as general manager of Stanford. He went ahead and fired the Stanford coach. So now general managers are above and managing the coaches. So that's an interesting new layer we never had in college before. So now you have general managers. And then like the new UVA coach, Odom, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, he's hired, not only was he hired by the general manager, but he hired a recruiting specialist. So literally you have to have someone on your staff now. All they do all day long is think about the transfer portal, high school kids, and how you can take really good players from other programs. It's a recruiting coordinator, which you have.
You know what's wild now is you're recruiting in high school, not so much to bring them to your school, but to keep an eye on them so that when they hit the transfer portal, you already have the dossier on them and you know who they are, what they like. You've met their parents, and they're now a second or third year, and you're trying to get them to come to your school.
That's
and
right.
A lot of times, if you almost got a kid, you're really in a good position to get them the second time around.
Like, Odom's bringing 3 players with him from VCU. So, and he already knows them. So that really helps.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he's gotten Chance Mallory to recommit, which is a huge deal because he's going to run the point. And then he's already said, we're going to be really aggressive in the portal. We're going to be really aggressive in NIL. I've spent the first 3 days on the job talking to boosters, which is really what it's all about. It's how much money you can get into the collective. And he clearly is the coach for this era. That's clearly what's happened. These guys are being hired with the understanding that they're going to have to deal with boosters and they're going to have to spend all year round recruiting, both their own players and in the portal.
Yeah.
And that's just reality. That's what it is.
There's a lot less control from the athletic program than there used to be, and a lot more autonomous sport to sport. It's almost like they're lone operators, these coaches. They're going out and they have their hands out to the boosters to be able to get a point guard or a left tackle or something,
Calipari and Patino just played each other, and we'll talk about that game. We're going to get into it, but it was a really good game. They both said in the interviews before that game that the sport has not only completely changed, but now they have 1-year rosters. Patino said, I have a completely different team I had this year than I had last year. And Calipari's like, yeah, this is my first year at Arkansas. And we completely remade the roster. 2/3 of it was completely redone. So,
and Patino said, I don't recruit high school kids anymore. So that's crazy.
Right. I mean, I guess,
that's the future.
No, they realize that the way you get good is you recruit the second and third year guy who has some experience. So that's what they realize. So it's a whole new world. It really is. Well, let's go take a look at the material we got for tonight. So this is our March Madness Mid-Tournament Update, episode 56. You can see there on the left, that's Caleb Love and his guys. Been playing unbelievable ball at Arizona since he got there. So that's there on the top left. On the bottom left there, you got Cooper Flagg with his buddies who have just been tearing this tournament up so far and really are looking like one of the co-favorites for this tournament. You got the Maryland picture after the game. Maryland hit a game-winning buzzer beater with a bank shot with about half a second left. What an incredible finish that one was. Then you got University of Florida there on the bottom center, absolutely destroying people so far, playing really good ball. You got Mark Pope there with Kentucky. He's got Kentucky playing really well, Mark Pope. And then, of course, that epic battle we talked about between Pitino and Calipari. Both of them are going to be Hall of Fame coaches. So any thoughts about these various pictures and these teams?
Very compelling games. All of these had some really interesting elements to them. I've been intrigued by Maryland, to be honest, but Arizona's quite a story. Duke looks like they're headed for the finals. They could be stopped, but I think I heard somebody describing them earlier today on one of the sports radio programs I was listening to, that they're an almost perfect college team.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
In terms of the way they're put together with both youth and experience, athleticism, size, length, the ability to shoot, the ability to go inside. Everybody rebounds, everybody passes. It's kind of like an almost near perfect team, even though it's not the best collection of talent I've ever seen or that they've ever had, but it is a sort of masterclass in assembling a roster.
Right. There's no question.
And then, of course, stars as freshmen, and then they have really good role players like Proctor, who've been around a long time. And, so Calipari Pitino was super compelling, and just a lot of good basketball in this tournament. I've loved it.
And really the best game in the entire tournament so far has been Florida-UConn. I mean, that was just an incredible game.
Yeah, that was a war.
Felt like two teams that either one could go to the Final Four, and Florida just came out on top by 2 points. But
yeah,
really great game. What do you think of Calipari taking this Arkansas team that hasn't been there in a long time to the Sweet 16 in its first season?
Incredible.
Pretty incredible. And to see the turnaround Pitino's done also at St. John's. I mean, these guys are really –
I'm happy for these guys. I've never been huge fans, but I'm glad that they are able to go to that next program and go to that next chapter in basketball. I mean, this is a different era. A lot of those older coaches couldn't transition. They couldn't bring themselves to admit that it wasn't just student athletes. These guys are fine with the fact that these are semi-pro players.
You have to be okay with it or you shouldn't be in the sport. Essentially, all the guys who weren't okay with it have all gotten out now.
That's right.
So that's basically what's happened.
And clearly basketball lost a lot of good teachers, but nonetheless, they were in a lot of cases unwilling to adjust to the new reality. And it's kind of cool seeing some of the old guard, a few that are willing to adjust and watch them have success. I like it.
I do too. And then the other impressive thing here, Mark Pope, who takes over from Calipari, he takes over a Kentucky team that had been kind of in the doldrums for 2 or 3 seasons. One of the reasons Calipari moved on was he just kind of worn out his welcome and his voice wasn't being listened to in the locker room anymore. So Mark Pope comes in, recruits a whole new class at Kentucky and brings them to the Sweet 16. It's pretty impressive. Takes over this blue blood program and has them right back there again. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's pretty cool to see a blue blood coming back to life, and the job he's done has been amazing. It's not the best roster that they've had, but again, it's good roster construction. It's good, making sure you're taking care of every part of the team equally and creating mismatch problems and depth and all kinds of stuff. Kentucky coach,
he's doing an impressive job.
Doing an incredible job.
And then related to Maryland, of course, I picked Grand Canyon University, and you kind of scoffed at me and said, I really think Maryland's really good this year. And of course, you were right. They're in the Sweet 16, too, after that big buzzer beater.
They've been impressive to me.
Yeah. No, they're good. They're very solid. Do you think Florida and Duke are the 2 favorites?
Yes.
Yeah, I do too.
They're the two most talented teams overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
But I don't think they're unbeatable. I think there's a lot of teams in there that could really give them fits and hit them on a cold shooting night and stuff. And, I think that's why you watch them. That's why you watch these games. This is getting good now.
There's some really good teams left, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. And really good matchups. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see those two teams go down because they might run into a team that really matches up against their weaknesses.
No doubt. So looking at some of the headlines, Duke's blowout win shows the Blue Devils are capable of. I think that's what we were just speaking to there.
Yep.
There's a feeling that, I thought they were going to get knocked out in the Elite Eight by Alabama. That was what I called in my bracket. I still think it's a possibility, but man, the way they're playing ball right now, if they continue to play the way they're doing, I'm not sure Alabama can get that one done. So that's been really impressive to watch Duke and the way they're playing right now. We'll see. Mark Pope's Kentucky roster rebuild is peaking at the right time. He had to completely redo this roster. He only kept 2 players from last year's team.
I know.
The fact that
this is all him,
His GM came out the other day and said, you have to realize he's got us in the Sweet 16, but he's 2 to 3 years ahead of schedule. He's like, we didn't expect this until like 26.
That's right. So
it's pretty amazing to see.
Imagine what he can do when he gets all his guys in there and gets to have them in the system for a while.
He hasn't even had a full year to recruit yet.
I know.
So yeah, it's pretty impressive. Number 1, Florida halts UConn's reign in an excruciating ending. So it came down. UConn actually led this game most of the game. It looked like Florida was going to get knocked off by the champs, and Florida just kind of gutted it out those last.
They wouldn't go down. Florida wouldn't go down,
and UConn wouldn't either. So it just felt like 2 immovable objects.
Yeah, UConn looked like they had the heart of the champion, but they were not quite as talented.
It was kind of, I watched this game. It was kind of like the perfect basketball game, 79-77. Like all the best players on both teams played really well. The coaches did great. It just, someone had to lose, unfortunately. That's what it felt like. So UConn.
I think you said it. You said that felt like a Final Four game.
It did.
Yeah, I think so.
It looked like one. So. Felt like it, looked like it. UConn was unfortunate to meet them so early, round of 32.
Yeah.
So Love carries Arizona into the Sweet 16, and Arizona holds off Oregon and advances to the Sweet 16. So those two are kind of together.
I mean, I love seeing kids have success. It's the new, it's the new reality.
So he left Carolina, carries Arizona to the Sweet 16, and it's pretty cool to see him living up to his potential. He never really felt like he was one of those top 3 recruits out of high school that never really kind of lived up to his potential, I guess you could say. So I'll tell you, Arizona here beat a really good Oregon team. Oregon had a really solid year in the Big Ten. Nobody saw this coming from them. Everyone thought they were going to be bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten, and they played so great all year that they got this bid as a number 5 seed. So this is a pretty impressive win by Arizona to hold them off. So Maryland advances on a buzzer beater. What an incredible game that was. It looked like their opponent had scored and Maryland was going to go down. They were going home. And they kind of called the timeout and drew up this perfect play for 2.5 seconds left. Get it into the right guy's hands. He makes a little move to his left. And then with half a second releases the ball barely before the buzzer goes off. And he banks it in. It was just
that was crazy.
What an astounding finish that one was.
I was listening to sports radio recently, and they were talking about how there's this myth about last second buzzer beaters and how frequent they are. They're actually really rare. Not every tournament has one, and most tournaments don't have more than like one. And this was a true buzzer beater.
It was.
This was like at the buzzer, not with 5 seconds left and there's not enough time to, get a good shot the other way. It's at the buzzer. They're very rare, and it's really a special thing when it happens.
And everybody was criticizing Maryland for like celebrating so much in the locker room. I'm like, why? These are kids. They just had an incredible finish. They go to the Sweet 16. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I think they should celebrate. Now
There's
you don't want to
like
celebrate
1 or 2 buzzer beaters per tournament.
You celebrate for that
Definitely.
night, and then the next day you look at the film for your next opponent.
Yeah, and you find
I
out
didn't
why it
un
was so close. Maryland should have won that game, so it wasn't like the result was crazy.
I didn't understand that criticism. To me, these are kids, man. I mean, let them have fun, What a
These are people whose bracket got blown up because
what an
or
incredible
whatever.
ending.
Maybe they lost because Maryland didn't hit
Yeah,
the spread,
it was a great finish. It really was.
Yeah.
So next one is SEC breaks record for the most Sweet 16 teams from a single conference. Of course, they got 14 teams into the tournament. And they've got 7 moving on into the Sweet 16, the most ever from any
Yeah.
conference.
It's
7 out
that
of the
NIL
16.
money.
Yeah.
The SEC is leading the way in NIL, and the Big Ten is a close second. And of course, they've done well in the tournament, getting a good amount of teams in. So it really comes down to NIL now.
I
They're
remember
determined.
we used to get like 3 or 4 ACC teams into the Sweet 16. Thought we were absolutely dominant. And they're getting 7.
I know.
It's truly amazing to watch. So, any thoughts about that? Why that's happening? I know you
Yeah,
said money.
NIL. I mean,
Is it
they're
just
getting
NIL, or is it that they
it
give them
is because they're getting the players. They're getting the players because they're throwing money at it because their football programs have these slush funds from that enormous TV contracts. So all
Yeah.
this money is pouring into the schools and they're funneling it into the major sports. Maybe
Mhm.
not, the badminton team, but definitely the major sports, the big money makers, the first football, then basketball, then baseball, and on down. But
Right.
the top sports are getting lots of funding, and the SEC is running circles around everyone else. And so that's exactly why, because they can hire more players to come play at these teams. So,
Mhm.
it's absolutely NIL and transfer portal, people transferring in for money, people
But,
coming for
I also think the SEC has
money.
upgraded their coaching across the board too. I think it's partly coaching too. They're getting some really good coaches in the SEC.
Well, it's easier to get a coach to come if you know
Mm.
that you're going to be able to buy a really good team.
And by
So,
the way, they can pay coaches unlimited.
right.
And they do. They
Yeah,
really
and
pay
these
well.
are these are teams that don't mind having huge buyouts because if things don't go right, then they're going to fire you, and you're going to walk away and get paid for 6 more years, you know,
Mhm.
whatever million a year just to sit on the beach.
That's right. That's true. So this next one's interesting. Boring first weekend. Was that the most boring NCAA tournament first weekend in memory? Barely any upsets, lots of blowouts, no Cinderellas to the Sweet 16, just one last-second game winner. So what are your thoughts? This is really the kind of narrative that's come out of the first weekend, is that this has been a boring
Okay,
tournament so
well,
far.
it's a fair criticism, but I would say that the one last second shot is pretty standard. Second, I would say that there were some upsets. Um, there weren't that many tremendous compelling stories, but I think that speaks to the fact that they really got most of the seeding right this year.
That's what I think it is.
They
I
didn't
think they nailed the seating this year. I agree.
yeah,
Completely.
they didn't have a 9 versus 8 where the 9 was much better team than the 8, you know? They had the 9 versus 8 that was real competitive, and
I think what people are complaining about is that the upsets that did happen were like the 10 versus the 7. Like, that's not really an upset, and
well,
that's what
11
people are
versus
complaining.
6 is the one where it's,
Yeah.
you
People are
have
expecting a couple of 15s beating a 2 or some 14s beating a 3,
yeah.
and it just
Well,
didn't
the
happen.
11 versus 6 is the biggest, 50-50. It's
Mhm,
literally 50-50 in terms of upsets. So
mhm,
that's one where if you get the seeding wrong, that's where you put your money if you're
mhm,
gambling. Um, that's where you anticipate there'll be some upsets is 6 versus 11. And we had some of that. So
mhm.
that wasn't very surprising.
We
We
did
didn't
have
have
more
any we didn't have any big team go down to a less team.
we did
Not
have
really.
more blowouts than I was expecting. I didn't think we'd have
Yeah,
that many. There was a lot of wins by 20 points or more, and that's
I
you
agree.
usually don't see that. So, and the
Yeah,
no Cinderellas to the Sweet 16, I mean, that is unusual. I mean, that's something that we've already talked about, but
I agree.
it's
I think
unusual
that is NIL related. That's what
that
I
you don't
think.
get at least like one McNeese or somebody
Mhm.
like that who
Yeah.
gets in. So, just didn't happen this year,
Yeah, I know.
Michigan State wins ugly is the next one. And, from my perspective, they always find a way to win, and they always find a way to win ugly. They're always physical. They out rebound you. They out defense you. They're really well coached. So do you find this surprising at all that Michigan State's winning ugly?
Not really. I
I
mean, it's
don't.
kind of the personality of Izzo's teams that they come in and they beat you up, and it
Mhm.
might stay kind of close, but they just physically dominate you. Every single player on Michigan State always looks like, to me, they're about 35 years old,
That's right.
and
They
and
do.
they wear you down. They're not always the most talented, but they
And they
always advance because they just
they
impose
always
on you.
have like 2 or 3 guys that are 6'11", and they look like they're football players. They're just these
Yeah,
huge guys that guys bounce off of.
yeah.
I don't know where it's like a factory, these big guys. We always have big guy envy in Virginia of what Michigan State puts together. The next one's Ole Miss.
Absolutely.
Ole Miss headed to the first Sweet 16 since 2001. They have not been there in a long time. Really kind of cool to see this program really rebound and have some success this year. They're playing really good ball. What's your thought about Ole Miss?
Beard is doing an incredible job. He's a great coach.
You remember he did a great job for Texas Tech when we played him.
Absolutely, I remember. Guy's a great coach.
Yeah.
But again, SEC, tons of money flowing into the Ole Miss football program. Not surprising that teams like Ole Miss that 5 years ago were a joke, not in all sports, but I don't think of them as basketball royalty or anything.
Right.
They're going to be good now because they have that financial backing and the capabilities of going and competing against some of these players.
So basically, everyone in the SEC is good now. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, except for probably the bottom two teams. They're going to struggle because they're probably not getting the NIL support, but everywhere else is, yes.
Think about it. You got Auburn, you got Kentucky, you got Florida,
Yeah.
you got Ole Miss, you got my
Yeah,
goodness.
and I do think, though, that other leagues will find a way to compete, and then it'll become more competitive, obviously, and then it'll be more – there'll be more comparable talent levels in each league, and
Mhm.
then everything will be better because it'll be more spread out, and
Mhm.
there'll be a better opportunity for each division to be represented equally. I think everyone should have 4 teams in, and they should all be relatively able to beat each other.
I feel that way too. It needs to become a little more balanced. I hope it does next 2 or
Yeah,
3 years.
I think it will. It'll correct itself.
So the biggest upset so far is number 10 Arkansas beat number 2 St. John's. That was a great game, by the way. Of course, Calipari versus Patino and all of that. But
Oh yeah.
I really felt like most of this game Arkansas was the better team. I really felt that way.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, and I think you might agree with this, I think Arkansas goes through the gauntlet of what's an SEC basketball schedule all year. So, I mean, one game you're playing Auburn, the next game you're playing Kentucky, the next game you're playing Florida. I mean, goodness. So they go through that kind of gauntlet, and then they go up against a Big East team that hasn't had that kind of schedule. And I think it makes a difference.
I think it absolutely makes a difference. I mean,
you get Calipari versus Patino, but it just looked like Arkansas was the better team, and it looked like they were more prepared. So,
yeah.
interesting. A lot of people had St. John's losing, but not losing until this next round, Sweet 16.
I thought St. John's was going to beat Arkansas, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
But
seeing them play, Arkansas definitely belonged there. So
if you watched all 40 minutes of that game, Arkansas was the better team, barely.
Yep, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, so it was surprising. End of the road, McNeese's magical March ends in a gritty loss to Purdue. And, of course, we watched that game, and we're rooting on Purdue. But McNeese, of course, was a really nice story, and a lot of people were hoping they'd be the one Cinderella that got in this year. But they couldn't quite get it done. Purdue was a little bit better that day. Any thoughts on this one?
Tremendous job of coaching by McNeese. And I'll tell you, at NC State, the word on the street, they're really excited to have him come.
They should be. They should
They're
be
so excited because he's so good.
He is.
Apparently, what I heard from a friend of mine who was in some really high level rooms with him was that he commands the room, and that he's a really commanding speaker and very dynamic, and he'll be really helpful to NC State. But McNeese's run was magical. Tremendous job of getting the guys to believe and to put it all together and to put all those hard practices into a system that really gave a tough game to Purdue. I think Purdue was the better team, so
They were the better team, and
pulled it out.
Painter's a really good coach. Their coach, Painter, is one of the better coaches in college basketball. I mean, he just
Yeah.
is. And you have to realize they were the runners-up last year. So you're talking about UConn and Purdue. Those two teams are going to have a lot of fight and a lot of pride.
Purdue's been good for years now.
Yeah, they're not going to go down easily, right? So,
They're Sweet 16 and Elite 8 kind of every year. And so one of these years they're going to sneak up there and get it, but they have a program that's really solid.
There's no question.
It's not a question of whether they're making the tournament for the most part. It's are they going to lose in the Elite 8 or Sweet 16? Are they going to make it to the Final Four? I mean, they're a good team.
I was really happy about this one, and definitely hats off to McNeese, and I'm really glad NC State got him. So we will see what happens there. So here's the tournament scores coming out of the round of 32 from this weekend. Hopefully most of you got to see these games. They were some pretty good games. Auburn squeaks this one out. They really kind of struggled with Creighton in this game, and they really didn't play very well in the first round. So one of the reasons no one's talking about number 1 overall seed Auburn is because they've been kind of unremarkable so far, although they did win both games.
Well, I think that was a pretty good win right there.
Yeah.
I think that their demise has been premature. They were dominant this year. They were the best team in college basketball, and I would not want to play them because if they
a lot of people were writing them off because they lost their last 4 games of the season. But you're right. You can't write off a team that's this powerful, has this many players on it.
Bruce Pearl said, "Look at who we lost to. We lost to top 10 teams." Like,
right. Well, it goes back to the SEC.
Nobody's happy. Nobody's happy in their squad that they lost, but it's pretty understandable when you run into some of the teams they played at the end.
Yeah.
There's no shame in it. They played really good teams, and those teams brought their A game and took them down. So Auburn had kind of a rough last month, but last couple weeks, I mean, but they're not panicking. They're very together. They've been humbled. They got to experience a really successful season where they played well together, and they had, Broome got injured a little bit, and they played well without him. They were winning without him. Like they've shown depth. They've shown the ability to win close games. They've been blowing people out. So yeah, they sputtered right at the end, but I don't know. I think there's time to turn it around and come together and play hard.
Do you think
I would not want to play Auburn?
Think the humbling was good for them? Maybe. I mean, maybe they needed that so they don't get shocked in the tournament. I don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, I will say it doesn't seem like they've hit their stride yet, but I think they could. Like they haven't played the game they really want to play yet in this tournament, and I'm wondering if it's coming.
I think they're coming alive slowly in the tournament, and the question is, are they going to be at their peak when they need it against a really good team?
One of these weeks, it feels like they're going to break out with like 96 points or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
or have a stinker and lose and finish them off.
Or have a stinker, right? So we'll have to see what happens there. Gonzaga played really, really well in this game and almost pulled it off, but Houston held on. Number 1 seed Houston. This was a upset a lot of people had picked in their brackets. They had Gonzaga going kind of far in the tournament. So for those folks, it was really disappointing. This was a really good basketball game. I watched the whole thing on this one too. And Houston was just slightly better. They just have a really good roster. Very, very solid top to bottom. Really well coached.
Yeah.
This was another one of those really great basketball games that felt like it could have been a Final Four game. So,
yes, these two programs, it's as good as it gets. It's near the top. Houston's been awesome, and Gonzaga's always good. They have some of the best coaching and players consistently over the last 10 years of any team.
I feel like the last thing you want to do is play Gonzaga in the round of 32.
Right.
You just don't want to play them.
No.
You want someone else to knock them off,
Yeah.
because they're
I wouldn't
just
want to
tough.
play Houston either, though.
No, absolutely. Next game is Arkansas's big upset over St. John's. This was a really great game. Like I said, it really felt to me like Arkansas was the better team all day. St. John's tried to battle, but their shooting touch wasn't there that day, and I just felt like Arkansas was more prepared, and the better team had the better roster, which I know sounds strange when they're the 10 versus the 2, but again, I think they were battle tested come out of the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
So really solid game there. You had Tennessee take care of business against UCLA. Actually, Tennessee didn't play great in this game compared to what their potential is, but UCLA really had an off shooting day, scoring only 28 points in the first half. And Tennessee kind of took care of business, but they also, I feel like, haven't played up to their potential yet, kind of like Auburn. So I'm wondering if they're going to have a breakout game.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's defense there was the difference maker.
Mhm.
And yeah, they're hoping to have their best basketball coming up,
Mm-hmm.
But they'll take the win and move on.
Survive in advance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech takes care of Drake. Drake's another team that felt like they were going to go a little further. I know I had them going to the Sweet 16. They lost and didn't get there. They have a really solid roster, but they lost to a really good Texas Tech team. Any thoughts on this one?
Texas Tech, I think, is a pretty outstanding program this year. And, no shame in that.
Everyone was picking Drake for a lot of different reasons. One, they wanted to pick an upset number 11 to go through, but also they had 31 wins. But what that tells me, and if you look at the conference they play in, it's not very challenging.
Right.
So
They were in a little over their head.
So a lot of these teams that come out 31-3 out of a not a very good conference,
Yeah.
you might overweight them a little bit when they play a really good team. So,
Yeah.
and I know I did that in my bracket. So, lesson learned. So next one is BYU ends up slight upset of Wisconsin, who had been playing really good ball up to this point. BYU is playing really well though. So a lot of people picked BYU to kind of go far in this tournament. Thoughts on this game? Really high scoring.
Really high scoring. BYU doesn't have much defense, but they can score and stay with anybody. So I've been really impressed with two teams that nobody's really talking about, BYU and Maryland. Certainly not predicting that they do anything much more than maybe one more round, but I've just enjoyed watching BYU. I think they have a very high scoring, high flying team. It's very exciting. And I think that they have the ability to outscore an opponent, even when the opponent might be a slightly better team overall.
I mean, you saw that game right before the tournament started in their conference tournament when they beat Iowa State 96-92. That was a great
Yeah.
game, but no defense.
Yeah, no defense. Iowa State was shooting 58%. Which
This kind of
should,
surprised me because Wisconsin comes out of a defensive-minded conference
right,
in the Big Ten,
right.
and they couldn't slow down this offense, which is playing really well.
Yeah, and then they just had to try and score along, keep up with BYU in scoring. It's hard.
It is. This was a really good basketball game.
Yeah.
BYU comes out on top. So this is the one we've already mentioned. Purdue wins 76-62, kind of going away in the end. McNeese had a really horrific first half, put themselves in a huge hole, 18-point deficit, and just couldn't bring it all the way back. And Purdue kind of took care of business, controlled action from beginning to end, had the better roster. McNeese's Cinderella story comes to an end. But any other thoughts on this one?
I think Will Wade was a steadying presence. I think everybody knew he was leaving McNeese. And I think that they had kind of run as far as they could go. He's an impressive guy. He has put 4 teams in the tournament. So 4 different programs, I mean. So clearly they're on the right track there. It's a huge loss for them to lose Will Wade, but at the end of the day, Purdue is the better team, the better collection of players, and so there's really no surprise here, I don't think.
But are you surprised that the McNeese coach Wade didn't wait and do the regular protocol where you wait until after the tournament's over and then you announce It just seemed a little strange that they
Yeah.
were.
There's been a couple of strange things with this tournament. One thing that I've noticed that's been weird is the transfer portal opening in the middle of the tournament. That has to change. That can't continue. That's a terrible precedent. And then a lot of these coaches making moves, while the tournament's still going. I think there need to be some rules in place.
I mean,
There
he
should not.
can't go in, he can't do this to his players where he goes into the tournament, he's a lame duck.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
Odom,
mean,
Odom, who's going to Virginia, and I'm really glad he is. He waited until VCU got knocked out, and then he
yeah,
announced.
yeah, that's
So
right.
just,
That's how it should be done. But I think there was some pressure to get Wade in place because so many people wanted him. And I think he probably really wanted to be at NC State. So at the end of the day, I don't like a couple of things that are going on, and I think they will get them fixed. I don't think opening the transfer portal right in the middle of the tournament makes any sense. I don't think that the coaches being able to take new jobs until after the tournament's over, I think would make more sense.
he
So
should just make it a rule, yeah, because
yeah, yeah,
he should have
simple.
told NC State, look, I want to coach to the nth of my ability in this tournament and take us as far as I can. So let's wait. I want the job. The answer is yes, but let's wait a couple days. Let me get through
Yeah.
this tournament. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason why just your athletic director and you don't know about it. And then as soon as the tournament's over, you have a press conference,
That's right.
you know?
Well, I'm rooting for him. I'm really glad State
Yeah,
got him.
it's good stuff.
Next game, Michigan continues to surprise me. Not only did they win the Big Ten tournament in a surprising fashion, but they took out a really good Texas A&M team here,
Yep.
scoring 91 points, and something I didn't think they could do because they've been kind of slogging around with 75-point wins. So, thoughts about this game?
Very high scoring. I think Michigan's underrated coming in. I think they have been playing really good basketball, and that was a great win against A&M.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I keep kind of doubting Michigan even after their Big Ten win, and I had them going out, but I was incorrect. They're really good, and they're here. They're in the Final 16, so we'll see how far they can go.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is the big game we talked about. I think the best game in the round of 32 by far, and that is Florida UConn. This felt, like we said, like a Final Four game or a championship
Yeah.
game. And UConn, I was so impressed. This is a team that lost 3 guys to the NBA last year, and yet just feels like they reload and they are right back in there again. Didn't have quite the year they usually have this year as an 8 seed, but gave Florida everything they could have.
Dan Hurley's a good coach.
Yeah, he is.
It's simple.
And this may be the toughest game they have until the final. That's my feeling about it.
Maybe.
It was that tough a slog to try to get this one done.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about this heavyweight matchup?
I mean, it was just a great game. I guess I would just say that UConn had some nice contributions from their bench, and I think Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin played phenomenally for the Gators. I predicted the Gators would win this one, and I have to admit, seeing UConn play reminded me of why they're back-to-back champs. I think Florida's on a special mission right now, and it's kind of too bad these two had to play this early.
It feels like Final Four. It should have been Final Four.
Yeah, or
I
finals,
agree.
or
Yeah, or Elite Eight maybe.
semis or something.
Yeah, that was just a great game. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
Next one's Duke Baylor. This was supposed to be a competitive game. There was actually a couple folks before the game when they did the predictions by the telecasters. They had 7 people pick. They had 5 people pick Duke and 2 pick Baylor as an upset. But from the opening tip, this was just a complete blowout. Duke was up almost 40 points at one point. What are your thoughts about this dismantling of Baylor?
I think Tyrese Proctor made a statement in this game. He was phenomenal. He hit 7 threes.
Mm-hmm.
Just a great player. He's been around a little while now, and everyone focuses on Cooper Flag, and then Con Canupo gets a lot of attention too. But to watch Proctor. If you forget about him, he's going to remind you.
He had the game of his life. It's as
Yeah,
simple
I
as
mean,
that.
he was just draining threes, and
Mhm.
he just I don't know. Duke looks unbeatable unless you bring your A game just to give yourself a chance.
They look scary. They
They look
really do.
kind of
They have
scary.
so many
Yeah,
ways to beat you. They play really good defense. They have
they play
active.
defense. I mean, you name it.
They
They're tough.
rebound well. They shoot from the outside. Then they alley-oop dunk to Cooper Flag. It's just
Yeah, Cooper Flag had 9 rebounds.
you have nightmares if you're the defensive coach trying to
Yeah,
prepare for that game.
everyone
Absolutely.
contributed. Unless you
That's
go
right.
deep on their bench. Everyone
So
got
next
6 points, 8 points.
so next game, another Cinderella. A lot of people were hoping would go through to the Sweet 16 was St. Mary's, but couldn't get it done against a really good Alabama team that's been playing well for about 6 weeks. And I actually picked them, as you know, to go to the Final Four. Thoughts about this game? St.
I
Mary's
mean,
coming to an end.
St. Mary's starters did really well. Played hard, really hard. But Alabama was just too much for them. Alabama
Mhm.
had players on their bench getting 10 and 12 points.
Mhm.
I think they just dominated in rebounds. It was crazy. They had, their starters were getting 8 rebounds, 11 rebounds, 6 rebounds. So they just played really well. Alabama's for real. They're tough. Alabama hit 41% from 3. That's really good. And, St. Mary's was 21% from 3. So
Mhm.
that they just couldn't hang with them there. And then field goal wise, 51% versus 34. There were a lot of imbalances in the stats that kind of lend themselves to
Right. It's
why
actually
this game is
surprising it's as close as it is with the stats
correct.
you're
If
bringing
you
up.
look at the stats, like 42 points in the paint versus 30, you would think Alabama kind of dominated a little bit more than that. But
Mhm.
I think they just cruised to victory once they got control of the game. That's all you need to do. You don't
Alabama
want
is
to
so darn athletic. It's just
Yeah,
crazy to watch that. I love watching them play because they're so
incredible
athletic.
athletes. They're going to be really hard to beat. The only way you beat them is high skill level.
And what's interesting is I have 2, as I told you, I have 2 perfect regions and 2 that are completely decimated in my bracket. But the one perfect region I have is Duke and Alabama on a collision course in the Elite 8 to play each other
Yep.
for a ticket to the Final Four. And I think that's just going to be an epic game. I cannot wait to watch that game.
And that's
Duke
really kind of
Alabama.
what we're talking about. That's the kind of chalk that you want because that's going to be the game. Would you rather have seen St. Mary's go through and get annihilated by,
Duke by 30
Duke?
points.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Yeah.
It might make a cool story leading up to it, but then as soon as you watch it for 5 minutes, you turn it off because it's not.
Whereas Duke Alabama is going to be very highly
Duke
watched.
Alabama is going to be a great game. You're
Yeah.
going to watch the whole thing, and
Yep.
you're going to call your friends about it afterward, and you're going to say, "I wonder what the sports guys are going to talk about with this," because it was
That's right.
so
That's
much
right.
stuff.
Oh, we're going to talk about
You
it.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So New Mexico and Rick Pitino's son from New Mexico ends up losing this game to Michigan State. A very hard-fought defensive battle, very physical. We talked about Michigan State likes to win ugly, and they knocked New Mexico out, who was another Cinderella potential, and didn't get to the Sweet 16 like some thought they might. Thoughts about this game?
Yeah, I mean, statistically very similar games for their teams. So in the stats, not a lot of reasons why one team would dominate over the other. I would say that Michigan State had more depth. There's no question about it. They were getting lots of scoring from their bench. They were rotating guys, staying out of foul trouble, and they just kind of wore them down. I think there was a clear. I mean, New Mexico starters did really well. They were
Mhm.
fighting hard. It's just there wasn't much else New Mexico could bring in to keep the
And,
fresh.
Izzo, of course, is Hall of Fame, one of the probably top 3 or 4 coaches of all time.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like the younger Pitino was outcoached. I really didn't. It just
No. No,
It felt like
it was
Michigan State's a
I think
little
it's
bit better,
depth. I think it
just
was
a little
depth.
better.
As
Yeah.
as you guys start getting gassed, what can you do about it? You know,
Mhm.
can you bring in another guy who's going to put up 14 points in a few minutes of playing time? Or is your guy going to go in there and dribble the ball off his foot
And also
and then
Michigan State had a little bit more offense, and they had a little bit more rebounding, and that's really all it takes in the long
yeah.
run of the game.
Yeah, and like
So
we said, Michigan State always has guys that look like they're about 35 and they got guys in their program. So, you know,
mhm.
it's Izzo.
That's right.
He's one of the best.
Younger Patino, though, has a really bright future. It's gonna be interesting to see
No
what he
question.
Yeah.
He went in there and hung with him. So yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Give him some more time recruiting and everything else.
So another Big Ten team, Illinois, who some people had going a little further than they did, loses to Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. This is another solid basketball game. I thought played very well by both teams, but Kentucky
Mhm.
just a little bit too much for them. Thoughts about this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good game. Nice amount of offense. I think it was a good matchup. And statistically, very similar. I think 3-point went to Kentucky for sure. That statistical advantage. Steals 14 for Kentucky, 3 for Illinois.
Mhm.
Obviously, active hands, better defense,
Mhm.
and points off turnovers, 26 for Kentucky and 8 for Illinois. So a lot of defense, a lot of steals, and
Mhm.
turning it into points. Steals and turning into points. So it's kind of was the difference in the game. And then points in the paint, 40 for Kentucky and 32 for Illinois. So
Mhm.
a few advantages for Kentucky, and that's all they really needed to win by 9. So
So this felt like a mid-level Big Ten program that barely squeaked into the tournament, which is what Illinois was, and a higher level SEC team from the best basketball conferences this year. And they just
yeah,
kind
but
of they wore them
I,
out in the second half.
I felt like Illinois belonged there.
Yeah, for sure. They're a
You
good
know,
team. They're a
it's a
good
good
team.
team.
But SEC teams right now are just playing at a really high level, as you can see.
Yeah.
So the next one we got the Ole Miss for the first time, as we said, from 2001 to today, 24 years, they finally got to the Sweet 16. Built our buddy Luke's team, Iowa State. When I talked to Luke about this after this loss, he told me that Iowa State had just had too many injuries down the stretch and in the tournament. They had a bunch of guys out and guys hobbled and guys limping around. And it was just a little too much to sustain going into this round of 32 game against a really good Ole Miss team.
It
So
was a
thoughts about
great
this one?
matchup, really good matchup. Beard's an incredible coach. Iowa State played hard. It was a really good game. Ole Miss edged out Iowa State in almost every category,
Mm-hmm.
in 3-point, in shooting percentage, in steals, in
Mm-hmm.
points off turnovers, in you name it, rebounds, etc. They won kind of all the statistical categories by a little bit. And that's kind of what you look at when you win by a high scoring game. You win by 13.
And you were talking about the offense in this tournament, and it's showing up. I mean, all these
Yeah.
teams scoring 91, 89,
Yeah.
88.
That's what I'm saying.
You have
It's nice.
Wisconsin scoring 89 and losing.
Fun to watch this kind of
Amazing.
tournament.
Yeah. A lot of offense this year. If you
Yeah.
like shooting, you really like this year. So this was the game I was talking about. Colorado State looks like they had it won. They were celebrating. There was only 2.5 seconds left. There's no way Maryland could come back. They take a timeout, go to the sideline. He pulls out the whiteboard and draws up a play. And all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, he's letting go of a shot that banks off and goes in.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob's impressive Maryland team finds a way to survive and move on. And anything else you can say about this one?
I mean, it was pretty impressive what the Maryland starters did. I mean, listen to the amount of points that their starters scored: 15, 17, 11, 16, and 11. Like, nobody else's scores look like that. I mean, everyone else is 23, 18, 8, 2, and 0. Like, there's usually one or two guys that are kind of doing all of it. Their whole
Mhm.
team scored decently, so they spread the ball around. There's no guy they're looking for. Maryland can attack you all over the floor.
No doubt. But I will say Colorado State's the kind of 12 team that you don't want to play. Like they're just
Right.
one of
They're
those teams that
dangerous.
they
They're
can
really
knock
well
you off.
coached.
Yeah, they can knock you off. But Maryland, they get it done in a really exciting game. Probably the most exciting game of the tournament so far.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see what they do with this opportunity, this kind of second lease on life that they've been given out of this shot.
And
See what happens.
Nick Clifford, he scored 21. I mean, he had a nice performance.
Mm-hmm. So I'm
So
interested.
they got a lot to be happy about, Colorado State.
They should. They played really well. It's a
Yep.
really great basketball game. So last one here is Arizona, and Caleb Love takes care of business against a really solid Oregon team that was really kind of scrappy and chippy. This was another great basketball game, 87-83. Thoughts here?
I think Caleb Love coming from Carolina, that was a good transfer. I think he's happy. His team's doing really well there, and they're definitely glad to have him. So,
And I don't think Carolina has bad feelings about him. I know there's some
No.
Carolina folks that are now rooting for him because Carolina's out.
Right.
So,
But I mean, he obviously is helping Arizona. I mean, he got 29 points.
right.
He got 9 rebounds. He's contributing a lot, and he's a
Right.
leader. He's a veteran, and you nowadays you throw all these young guys in there and transfers, new people come to your program. You want some stability. You want
You
a couple of
remember
veterans.
Remember what you said Patino said, that he doesn't recruit people out of high school anymore?
Right.
Don't you think he'd rather have a Caleb Love who's 22
Yeah.
years old and has
Yeah.
4 tournaments under his belt
Yeah.
than a
He said
freshman with no experience?
He said freshmen aren't going to win you the championship. I mean, that's just how it is. And he said, I want guys to play now.
Yeah.
I don't want to rebuild anything. I want my guys to be ready to win the championship now.
So this is the new model. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, if you're a freshman coming out of high school, unless you're LeBron James, you're probably going to have to go to a smaller school,
Yes.
play really well, and then get in the portal.
So the smaller schools are becoming the farm system for the big boys. That's
right.
what's happening. And then everyone's going to transfer out of the smaller school into the main programs in their second, third, and fourth years.
And by the way, that's players and coaches, because the
Yeah.
smaller schools like McNeese become the feeder school to the ACC. That kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the ACC is going to become the feeder school to the SEC.
That's right. That's true.
So be careful what you wish for.
Already happening, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of great games in round of 32. The round of 64, not as much. There were a lot of blowouts.
Yep.
But this round was pretty good. As you can see, there were some really solid games.
And why is that? Because it's all good teams left. These were good matchups.
That's true.
I loved them. They were so good.
Yep.
Really good matchups. The coaches.
This is why I disagree with the boring. I don't think that's true. That whole narrative that came out, I don't agree with it.
I think what they're saying is the first couple of days were more boring than normal, and that's true. But I think what that gave us was more chalk than normal, and that gave us better 32.
Were there fewer McNeeses and Florida Gulf Coasts? Yes, there were.
Yes.
And that's just how it is.
But you're almost guaranteeing that the final is going to be epic because it's going to be a great team that survives.
And the Final Four will have 3 epic games. That's what it looks like. Really, really good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at the Sweet 16 schedule. This is our subscriber challenge of the week, guys. So drop us a comment. Rob and I are going to tell you who we think are going to win each of these 8 games starting tomorrow. Thursday, we've got 4 games. Then Friday, we have 4 games. That'll take us down to the Elite 8. And then Saturday and Sunday, the Elite 8 will take us down to the Final 4. So we have basketball action for 4 more days starting tomorrow, which is really exciting. So let's talk about each of these games, and you guys drop us a comment down below who you think is going to win. And Robbie, I'll let you lead off with the first one. Auburn, Michigan.
I'm going to Auburn.
Going to Auburn? Okay, me too. Me too. Although I've been downplaying Michigan's abilities the first couple weeks, and I'm not going to do that again. I'm taking them seriously. They're playing really well.
I think they're going to give Auburn a tremendous run at it. But I just think the talent's going to win out. But
this won't be a blowout.
Michigan has been very underrated for a while, I think.
This will not be a blowout. We're not talking 25 points.
It shouldn't be. If it is a blowout, it's only because Auburn got control towards the end of the game and maybe made the score bigger. But I don't think that throughout the game it's going to feel like a blowout.
Mm-hmm. This next game is tough to call. Michigan State, Ole Miss. Kind of a grinded out style versus a high scoring offense. Question is, which one's going to surpass the other?
I think Ole Miss is going to take them.
I agree. I think Michigan State hadn't faced a team like this in a while. An SEC high-powered offense can score from anywhere.
Yeah.
Run and gun, shooting within the first 5 seconds of the clock.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to end up winning. I think it'll be close.
Well coached.
5-6 points maybe. But
He's one of my top handful of coaches I would want.
I think Chris Beard gets it done. I do.
Yeah.
Will I be shocked if Michigan State wins by a point or two? No, I won't.
No, because I love Izzo. So
yeah,
it's not going to – no. But I think Beard is this incredible young talent as a coach.
Yeah. So next one, solid game here too. Florida, Maryland. Maryland coming off the high. They kind of feel like they had a second lease on life against the team that a lot of us think is going to win the whole thing. Who do you got in this one?
I got to be honest with you. I think this is one of the top two matchups between all these teams of this round. I think this is the one I'm the most excited about. I think Florida wins it, but I think it's another battle. It's a war.
Mm-hmm. I, for the first time in this discussion, disagree with you. I think Florida's going to take control in this one. But you're thinking it's going to be a really close battle. I think it's going to be.
I think Maryland's going to play them really hard for a half. Maybe
it'll be close for a half. And then I think when you look at the last score line, it'll be, 88-70 or something like that. It'll be like a.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Florida will control the second half pretty easily.
I think that's right. I think they'll get control, but you never know. It's going to be a really good game until maybe Florida takes control. That's
early in the third quarter. Yeah. Texas Tech, Arkansas. You got Calipari. No one thought he'd be there against a really good Texas Tech team. Who do you got on this one?
I got to say Texas Tech.
Texas Tech?
I think so.
I agree. I think Arkansas's magical run to the Sweet 16 comes to an end.
Yeah, they've had a great run.
They do make it competitive, but they lose by about 6 points, I think, here. That's my guess on it.
Mm.
Next one's Duke, Arizona. Arizona's playing really well. Caleb Love knows Duke really well in his days from being at UNC Chapel Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to be a challenge for Duke?
You can't predict certain things like, if Cooper Flagg tweaks his ankle again or, things like that. But Duke should handle them most of this game and win by more than 10.
Mm-hmm. I think Caleb's had a really nice year and a really nice playoffs. And I think Arizona's been a really nice story, but I don't think they're in the same class as Duke. I think Duke probably lets them hang around for about halfway through the first 10 minutes of the second half, and then I think they put it on them. And you end up with about a 12 to 13-point win, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Duke takes care of business here. Alabama, BYU. What are your thoughts here? This is a really good game,
I love watching BYU.
By the way, all these games are pretty good if you think about it.
I love watching BYU.
Yeah.
I think Alabama takes them, but this is the other game that I really want to watch other than Maryland, Florida.
Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be incredibly competitive all the way down to about the last 5 minutes. And then I think Alabama's competitivism and their athleticism takes over. And I think they just make a couple more plays than BYU.
Yeah, I think Alabama can play defense and BYU can't. So I think at the end of the day, Alabama's going to be able to get some stops on BYU, and BYU's not going to be able to stop Alabama.
So like Alabama by like 7?
Yeah, I don't predict a huge blowout or anything. I just think that Alabama's going to be winning down the stretch by 4 and then up to 10 and then down to 7 and then up to 9.
Yeah, agreed. Houston versus Deb's Purdue team. What are your thoughts on this one?
Is Deb going to watch this broadcast?
Yes, she will.
Then it's going to be even. No. Got to say Houston, unfortunately. I think, unfortunately for Deb's team, Purdue's been great. I think that they could give Houston a run. I'll tell you this, what makes me nervous. Houston doesn't normally do very well in the tournament. So while I think normally if this was played in a regular game, Houston would win most of the time, Purdue's got a shot because Houston tends to sort of tighten up in the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Purdue can give them a run, but I think Houston's the better team, so they should pull it out.
I like this game to be one of the closest games of the 8 and to come down to like maybe even a last second shot kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think Purdue gets it done. I really think they're going to win by 2.
You got to say that, though.
I really do.
there?
I think they're going to win 85-83.
It's possible.
I think it's going to be a really great game.
I think this is a tough matchup for Houston. I think normally they'll take control of teams, but I think that the tournament is weird for them.
Yeah, I like Purdue, but I think Houston's tough, obviously.
Purdue's got a shot. They got a shot.
Last game is Tennessee versus Kentucky, side-by-side state rivalry. 2 really good teams playing really good ball. By the way, I think this one will get very high ratings. I think it's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is my third favorite, I think, in terms of matchups. I'm going Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to get it done.
I do too. I think Tennessee is kind of like Alabama. They're one of those really long, athletic, make lots of athletic plays type teams from the SEC. And
don't you love their roster?
I think Kentucky's had an amazing run. I think they've played a little bit above their head, and I think they're, like their GM said, they're a year or 2 ahead of schedule. So I think Tennessee ends up winning this game by about 5 points.
Kentucky's going to get better over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
They're going to be Final Four or something in the next couple of years.
So, guys, drop us a comment who your winners are for these 8 games. We'll look forward to reading those in Mailbag next week.
Let's do it.
So some of the headlines coming out of this, these are kind of off-season headlines around college basketball. The first one is, if Cooper Flagg does return to Duke, it could cost him an estimated $75 to $125 million in potential salary on the back end of his NBA career, since he would delay the start of his service clock to his second and third pro contracts. So we're talking about not just one season, but you're looking at the potential impact on his long-term career and career earnings. So what are your thoughts about this? Is this going to be in his mind when he tries to make his final decision?
I think there's a lot that goes into a decision like that, and you can't look at it just with dollars because there's no guarantees you get to a second, third, and fourth contract. Depending on if the wheels come off the truck and you start getting injured and stuff. Sometimes you need a little maturity. These are the things where the people around him really are going to matter here. Does he need some maturing as a person? Is he capable of going to the NBA and being handed $100 million shoe contract and not end up in the newspaper for bad things? He strikes me as a really good kid, but if people around him think that he needs a little more seasoning before he's, ready to take on a franchise at the NBA level, then I don't begrudge his family for stepping in and doing what they think's best for him.
But you have to at least think about it, right? What your potential earnings are for your whole career. You have to at least think about it.
Maybe, but I don't think it's the number one most important thing, because there's no guarantees you get to contracts 3 and 4.
Because if you
come out too early and you're not ready and you're a disappointment and you're a bust and then all this stuff, you never get to your 4th contract.
If he wants to come back because he likes playing at Duke and he has a girlfriend there and he doesn't want to leave her, and he can make $5 million.
Sure. $5 million in the bank. You're a big man on campus. You're working your way towards a degree. Maybe he wants to be closer to his degree before he stops, so that when he comes back to finish, all he has to do is another year or something. I don't begrudge that. It's not
No.
all about money because there's no guarantees. Nothing's in writing. There's
The
no
only people that think this way would be like his agents and people
agent.
that are
Yeah.
in the industry, that think about all the earnings he's going to lose
And
if he
is his
delivers.
agent truly out for his best interest?
Right. Right.
Or is it just dollar signs?
I kind of agree with you. I don't think this will be the top reason he either
It
stays or
shouldn't be.
goes.
He's going to be a very wealthy player if he stays. Even if he gets injured, he'll still be a
If he
lottery pick.
waits a year, he's still going to make a lot of money in the NBA.
He's still a
Let's be
lottery
honest.
pick, and he's going to be making 10 to 20 million a year for a while. So
Yeah, that's right. So next one here is very fun for you on the NC State campus that NC State officially announced the hire of Will Wade and as its new head basketball coach.
incredible
And
coach.
tell us about some of the things you're hearing around campus and the excitement.
Just I talked to somebody who's very important in the athletic program, and he said that he was blown away by him. He had a private meeting with him, and then he went to I think it was a luncheon a couple days ago, and basically what I'm hearing is that he commanded the room. He took a lot of questions. He was very affable, very likable, but they could see how he is in charge of those. He's going to be in charge of those men, and I think there was a lot of comfort with the way he was able to comfortably take control of the room. And
What's amazing is that
lead the program.
NC State already wanted him before the tournament started, but then the way he conducted himself, the way his team played, the way they won their first round matchup, they were kind of like the darlings of the tournament this year, did nothing but elevate his stock, and he was already going to get the job. So
Right, and what was interesting was last year, Keats, who I really like Keats, actually, the old coach at NC State, but he kind of lost his job last year. Keats did. But what happened was he went on that magical run and saved his career, saved his job, I mean. And so
yeah, you
on
can't
that
fire a
magic,
guy who goes to the Final
they
Four.
couldn't fire him, no,
Yeah.
because he became a celebrity overnight almost. And all his players were celebrities. They started doing signings at Golden Corrals in the area, and there were lines around the block, hundreds of people long. Their players became celebrities. So I mean, the coach couldn't be fired under those circumstances. So when he had a really disappointing year this year, basically what I'm trying to say is they've had their eye on a couple of guys since beginning of last year.
Mm-hmm.
So they know, they're very comfortable with.
And you think the reason they announced before the tournament was because they wanted to strike while the iron is hot, and they wanted to make sure he didn't go somewhere else.
Exactly.
You think that's why? But
Yeah, they had to
you're
get their guy, period.
but you're still agreeing that they should have waited to announce till
I
after
think
they
they should have been forced to wait.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think the NCAA should do a better job of having restrictions.
Mm-hmm. Right. So next one here is another picture of him, but this one is the first time that no mid-major schools have made the Sweet 16 in the 64-team era. You're talking about 35 years. This never happened.
Yep.
And so I know your theory is NIL, and I think that's a big part of it. But isn't it also transfer portal? Isn't it also coaching? Isn't it also concentration of talent in the big programs and the big conferences?
Well, the
I
NIL
think NIL is a big part of
yes.
it, but there's other contributing factors,
Well,
right?
no, but what I'm saying is the NIL is causing the concentration in a few conferences.
NIL and transfer portal, both.
Well, actually, transfer portal a lot of times will be the big time program transferring out to somewhere to get more playing time and stuff. So transfer portal can work both ways, but NIL doesn't work both ways. The teams that have the money are getting the players, and the ones that don't have the money are not getting the players. So it's very, very predictable that the SEC, while they have that football TV contract, is going to be good for years and have way
in
more
other sports too, not just football.
in all of the main sports.
Yeah.
All the money is trickling down to all the sports, not just football.
Mm-hmm.
So the Big Ten is second. They have the second most NIL money, and so they're going to be second most teams in the tournament and have the second best basketball conference. And that's just how it is.
So then do you understand some of the sadness of the casual fan who loves the madness and feels like some of the madness is fading because of this? Do you
Yeah.
understand
I
that?
wish there had been more upsets in the first 2 days as well.
Yeah.
But after that, I don't want to see them anymore. I want to see
Mhm.
Michigan State play Duke and have, the Blue Bloods just smashing into each other and,
Mhm.
Izzo versus, Krzyzewski. Like
Right.
that's the dream, is to have that towards the end of the tournament, is to have
Mm.
the best guys still standing with all
Mhm.
the best players that are going to be in NBA.
I think everyone likes to see 1 or 2 Cinderellas in there out of the 16,
I will
and
say that if you're going to go into the 16, 1 or 2 is fine. Having a compelling storyline is cool, but you don't want a bunch of weak matchups that are all
Mhm.
blowouts. That's what you're trying to avoid. You
For
want
sure.
to have, Florida, Maryland. That's good. That's a good one.
No doubt. The next one here, schools with the most tournament wins of all time. UNC number 1, Kentucky is right behind it by 1 win, so they actually could potentially tie them up this next weekend. You got Duke in 3rd, Kansas in 4th, and UCLA in 5th. Those are I would say, the 5 biggest blue bloods in college basketball ever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see if you look at their win totals, those 5 have really separated from the rest and really distanced themselves to the point where I don't think the rest can catch up. So Louisville's in 6th, Michigan State 7, UConn 8, Villanova 9, and Syracuse 10. Those are all really good programs, but you can see those top 5 are really separated. So any thoughts about
Yeah.
this and what looks like a concentration in these great programs? And it looks like it'd probably get even more as NIL gets bigger.
Well, that's the thing. I think what you're seeing there is it's always been that way. But the mid majors had an opportunity to get in there with the big boys, whereas now they don't really have the firepower.
Mm-hmm.
They have nice players, but all the best blue chip players are going to get paid millions to go play in the SEC
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit of the Big Ten.
You think any
And
chance any of these 6 through 10s can catch up, or are they just too far behind?
I don't know. Possibly. I doubt it. They'd have to have some special thing happen to their program.
You know what's amazing is almost all of those wins for Louisville, it was like 92% of them were Rick Pitino. And then
Yeah,
Michigan State is almost all Izzo. It was
that's
like
right.
71 out of 74 were Izzo. So it's just great coaches make a huge difference. They really do. I think these 5 programs have distanced themselves and will continue to distance themselves. I think these are the 5 blue bloods, and it'll be really tough for the others to catch them.
Yeah, but UNC's down a little. Kansas was down this year.
It's,
UCLA is not that great.
it's looking like
So
Kentucky might pass UNC briefly at least. It looks like Duke
mhm.
might catch up. Um,
I think Duke might get them.
you might see UNC, Kentucky, and Duke kind of be the top 3 and kind of distance themselves a little.
Yeah,
You might see
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah, we'll see. So last one here is no more perfect brackets after 2 rounds of the tournament. We're not talking 4 rounds or 5 rounds. 2 rounds of the tournament, 40 million brackets all busted.
Yeah.
So what's crazy about that is you have that situation, and yet the tournament's been much more predictable than normal. I mean, basically had most of the favorites win, and
But you
yet
have
you
you have a
still
good point. One of the reasons why is people are picking crazy
picking
upsets because
crazy.
they're
Yeah,
trying to take a shot in the dark, and there
yeah.
weren't that many.
I think if you just bet mostly chalk, you would maybe have a couple in there, perfect brackets. But because people are trying to get so crazy with the upsets,
But there was like one main upset in the first 2 days versus in the past there'd probably be 3 or 4.
right? That's right.
So
Yeah, I don't know. It's really surprising though to see it at 0 after 2 rounds. It usually takes a couple more rounds to knock everybody out. So there is still some madness in there, Robbie.
yeah.
So some more headlines continue. This is the big one for us. Virginia Cavaliers have agreed to a deal with VCU head coach Ryan Odom, making him their next head coach. I think this is just a humongous win for our program in so many different ways. He grew up a Cavalier fan. His father was a legendary coach for Wake Forest, and he has always felt connected to the UVA program. It's where he fell in love with basketball as a young kid. And what are your general impressions, thoughts about how exciting this is for the Cavaliers?
I think it's an incredible hire. This was the best hire by Carla Williams as an athletic director, in my opinion. I think he is going to be good for the program. He was a transition to the NIL era. He has fresh ideas. He wants to run a different style that's more run and gun, more fast paced, which is more palatable to players showcasing themselves and getting paid. So I think in the NIL era, his style is much more conducive for success in recruiting than the previous years under Tony Bennett, where he taught defense, he taught hard nosed. It wasn't going to get you paid. So I think this was a transition in the right direction with how things are right now. Not how they should be, but how they are.
I have to be honest, I was a little hesitant when I first heard this a couple days ago, but the more I've researched this, I am super pumped as a Cavalier fan. I just think he's the right pick at this time. I really do. He
Yeah.
gets it. He really gets where the sport is going. And he's making some really good hires around him. He's thinking about keeping a couple of the guys off the staff they currently have, including Kyle Guy, because he has a really good connection with the players. And
Let me put you this way. I would be
excited.
very comfortable sending my son to go play for him.
For sure. And the fact that he feels like he's coming home, I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he'll do whatever it takes to try and win for a team that he feels connected to.
That's
He's
right.
not just doing this for money, you know?
That's exactly right. He said he's so excited to live in Charlottesville, too. He's always loved Charlottesville.
Yeah.
So next one's about his head coaching stops. This is amazing, Robbie. In 10 years, this is his rise. So he started with the UNC Charlotte team as an interim head coach in 2015. Then he goes to Lenore Rhine and takes them to the playoffs 2 years in a row for the first time ever. They'd never been in the playoffs before. Then he goes to UMBC, and one of the years he knocks off the number one team in the country, University of Virginia Cavaliers, in the greatest upset in tournament history,
Yeah.
which is just still painful for us.
Thanks
to
for bringing that up.
think about. Yeah, but the fact that he's the one who did it.
No,
So
no.
then he goes to Utah State, and in all 3 years of Utah State, they make the tournament. Then he goes to VCU, and 2 out of the 3 years they made the tournament, including this year. He just takes every team he coaches to the tournament.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, he's the coach for Virginia in the ACC. And that's pretty incredible, that rise.
Yeah, it's
You
good.
think about it. Yeah. So really cool to see that rise by him. And this is the last one here about Odom. He likes a faster tempo and a harassing defense, something that definitely works for Mallory's talents. And Chance Mallory is going to be the point guard. Very highly ranked recruit. He's going to have fast pace with smaller guards, playing D, shoot a lot of threes, stuff like that, said Mallory. Odom called Mallory on Friday, and the two met sometime Saturday morning. And then Mallory said, I never wanted to leave Charlottesville. So thoughts about the impact he's already having and what kind of style of play he's going to want to play?
Well, I will say a lot of the players are hitting the transfer portal to get out. I think that it's a fresh start for Virginia basketball, and I think that they got the right guy, and he's going to just build from the ground up with new people. And I think that's what you want to do when the program kind of sputters off the tracks a little bit.
And if you're going to start a faster, run and gun type offense, you need new players anyway, right?
You need new players to run that kind of offense and defense.
Like I loved Blake Buchanan, but he can't run the floor like Jokic, right? He's not that kind of player. So if he's going to run this faster tempo, then he's got to have different players for sure.
That's right.
So next one here, this is really interesting. Imagine a center that towers over Wemby. This kid is 7'9", and he's the tallest recruit in 21 years, and he's coming into Florida next year. He's redshirted. He's
Is there?
actually on the team right now, and he redshirted, and
Yeah.
next year he'll be an active player. But what are your
Yeah.
thoughts about this kid, man?
I've been hearing
7
about him since last year and how he was
7'9".
going to Florida. Yeah. Yeah. I've watched his clips. It's pretty
I mean, he
interesting.
makes Wemby look short.
I know. He's enormous.
Yeah. So is this just the rich get richer? I mean, they were so good this year that they didn't have to play him. They could
Well,
keep him in the weight room.
I think he needed some time to develop
They said he needed weight room time. Yeah.
weight room, muscle. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I'm pretty excited to see how this kid plays. See if
Yeah.
he's any good. You know, what a monster that's going to be in front of you.
Yeah. Can you imagine taking the ball inside on that?
So the next one is the mock draft according to Athletic. Cooper Flag going first if he comes out. Then you got Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe. He was playing really, really well in this tournament so far, Edgecombe.
Mhm.
Ace Bailey, Jakutis, who's from Serbia. Knupel coming out of Duke.
Mhm.
Trey Johnson, Murray Boyles, Derek Queen, and Richardson. And in this case, they're thinking Broom is actually going to return to Auburn. So
Nice.
what are your thoughts about this mock draft?
I don't know. A lot of good players coming out. I think that it's logical that Broom might come back. I think it depends. I think if Auburn wins the whole thing, he should leave. Although it
Yeah,
might be nice to have back-to-back. It would be incredible.
right. Yeah, I don't know why they're thinking he's going to stay, but that's what they were saying in the articles, that they're thinking he might return. He's got one more year of eligibility. Maybe he
Yeah.
wants to be the number one pick,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. He can come back for $4 million a year and dominate
I don't know
college.
if I'd not come out so that I wouldn't be the second pick versus the first pick.
I think if he wins the championship and also wins Player of the Year, he's got to go.
He has to go. Yeah.
Now I'm looking here. The Hornets getting Edgecombe. That'd be a pretty nice addition to LaMelo Ball, who's the point guard. Edgecombe would be the shooting guard, so that'd be a pretty awesome tandem for
Yeah.
the Hornets. And then Knupel coming out at number 6. It's pretty incredible for Duke to have 2 top 6 players.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens here. See if Cooper comes out. The last one here, this was really funny. The McNeese State student manager had become a huge sensation, this Amir Khan. And now he's decided, after his big viral moment on TV where everyone was hitting him up and he was getting all these NIL deals and everybody was chatting him in Instagram and all these things, he's now decided he's going to follow Will Wade to NC State.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be the student manager at NC State. So this is crazy that this kid has become really famous. What are your thoughts about this guy, Khan?
He's like an internet sensation. He has all these product placement deals and whatnot. But it'll be interesting. I'll see him on campus. And
What are you going to do when he comes into your dining halls next year?
I will see him. I
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
It's
He'll
going
be
to be
right there.
interesting. I'll ask him what it's like.
Yeah. To be so viral.
Yeah.
Robbie, maybe you can get him to come on the show. We'd love to have him.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. We'd love to interview him. It'd be pretty cool to talk about
The
his viral
country's favorite
manager.
what do you call it? Manager, yeah.
He even comes out with the team and has the boombox on his
He
shoulder.
leads the team out. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny. So I want to see if he does the same role with NC State next year. It'll be fun.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
So some more memes here. This first one here is AP All-American First Team. They just named it, and you can see Flag and Broom are both on there, along with Sears from Alabama. Any thoughts about these guys here? Walter Clayton, Florida, of course, really great player, and then Braden Smith, who's been leading Purdue.
Those are the best players.
Yeah, that's your American first team, All-American First Team.
Mm-hmm.
So this one's pretty interesting. Iowa has now hired Drake's Ben McCollum, who just lost this past round. And as soon as he lost, Iowa announced their new head coach from Drake.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like this whole game of you got to pounce on your new coach really quickly is part of the deal.
You got to get him before someone else does.
Yeah. So thoughts about this one?
Just a really good coach. I would move quickly. I don't blame him, but I don't really like it too much, but it's smart.
But if you're a mid-major who's always good, like a Drake, do you like this? You're constantly getting your guys poached, your
No,
players, your coaches,
you're sad because
but you
if you have
can't
too good of a
compete.
season, you lose your coach.
You can't compete. He got his salary tripled. So I mean, how does he turn that down for his family?
You-
You know?
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah. So Drake can't compete. So I don't know what you do about it. So next one is the world's highest paid athletes. I thought this was really interesting. Cristiano Ronaldo is number one because he plays in the Saudi league. He
Mhm.
makes 260 a year. Steph Curry 153 a year because he makes about 100 million a year in endorsements. I had no idea he was in
Mm.
that many commercials. That's crazy. Tyson Fury 147, Lionel Messi 135, and then LeBron James number 5. What are your thoughts here?
Um, my thoughts are that these guys are all going to be doing pretty well this Christmas. I'm just kidding.
They can pay their
It,
bills.
it's insane money. But I don't begrudge them. They put the eyeballs on the sport.
Yeah.
I don't know about Tyson Fury, how much impact he actually has in his sport. I know he has a lot, but I don't know if it doesn't rise to the level of the other guys. But they earned it.
I guess if you're in big time boxing, you can make this kind of money. That's
They're
basically
the
what we're looking.
best guys at what they do, so they should get
Yeah.
paid big time, and they do.
And Ronaldo and Messi have been up there for a long time, and are basically have been recognized as the best two soccer players in the world's number one sport for a long time. So I kind of understand that, but I don't know. Amazing to see what some of the biggest athletes are making these days. It's really just astronomical.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's why they're billionaires, right? Making this kind of money per year. Used to be a whole career. So this is interesting. Jaden Daniels said coming to LSU gave him a fresh start and a new opportunity to grow, and that the transfer portal saved his career. So do you think that's true that, some of us who feel a little uncomfortable with how much you can transfer, but for some of these kids, they really look at it like it saved their career, like they would have wallowed in anonymity wherever they were.
I think there are going to be plenty of examples of successful transfers, but you're not going to hear from the ones that didn't really work out too much. So,
Hmm.
um, no, I'm so happy when kids do that, and he did that really for playing time. So
Hmm.
that's fine.
And then
That's
wins a Heisman and the national championship
yeah.
by doing it. So yeah,
Player empowerment's fine.
right. Right, absolutely. Well, I think, like you said, this is an example where it really worked out. There's going to be some, but you're right. There's probably a lot that do not that we'd never hear about. So that's a really good point. So this next one, most bet team to win the NCAA tournament in the betting odds, 13% of bets, 13.5% of bets are on Duke to win the whole thing. So that kind of surprised me a little bit because of some of the results I've been seeing where Florida was the top pick team. But Duke is the number one team in terms of the betting odds.
I've been hearing a lot about Duke, so I think, in my opinion, Florida is probably the second favorite.
They are. Florida's second and Auburn's third in
Yep.
terms of the number of bets in Vegas. So I don't know. That surprised me a little bit. Florida wasn't on top, but I don't know. Duke's a pretty safe bet right now, the way they're playing. I don't know.
Mm.
We'll have to see. This was interesting. The owner of the Celtics just sold his franchise. He bought it 14 years ago for $360 million and sells it for $6.1 billion. So I have to think that's a pretty good return. So what are your thoughts about some of the prices that these teams are getting? I mean, the Commanders sold 2 years ago for $6 billion, and now NBA franchises are selling for that much.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch the inflationary cycles of the sports and the economy as well, and when they converge, it's wild.
I mean, I didn't think NBA franchises would be anywhere close to what NFL franchises are getting, but seems like they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of injection of Chinese interest in basketball and in the NBA. So there's a tremendous amount of worldwide sort of acclaim now where there's interest,
And
whereas
also,
there really wasn't 10 years ago.
think about the timing of selling it right after you win the NBA championship last year. It's pretty good timing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how much that increased his sale price, but
probably a lot.
pretty amazing to see the NBA inflation that's happening. This was interesting. The players have all the power now. Coaches have none. And that was from Arducci from Pittsburgh. Do you feel that's true? And can you see the frustration level among the coaches and what they got to deal with?
Yeah, it's a different situation now.
Players have all the power.
Yeah,
So
they're
it's
all
interesting.
1-year free agents.
And so the coaches, they have to kind of worry about the way they treat the player, and they got to kind of coddle them a little bit, and you can't yell at them as much as you used to.
Yeah, you
Like,
have
get
to
out,
recruit your
get
own
out.
players constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sad situation. I'd like to see a little bit more parity in terms of the power, but I do commiserate with these guys, what they're trying to do. Well, Robbie, I'm going to hand it over to you, man, for the mailbag and the news segment.
All right. Basically, we have the mailbag. We have Bocce is a perfect mix of skill, strategy, and fun. At Amelia. What did you think about that?
I love that, man. You know what,
Skill,
Amelia?
strategy, fun.
I completely agree. That's everything that we've experienced with it. We love doing that episode. We love filming the live footage at the beach. It was so much fun, and we agree it's a great game, and it's just so much fun and so competitive, and we just love doing it.
Yeah, we love playing it. It was really fun putting that episode together. We planned it actually for months. We were talking about that, and we were waiting on football to end, and we were really excited to go to the beach. We were hoping it would be warm enough, and it was. It was nice that day, and so we love playing it on courts and also at the beach. And we recommend everyone out there go check out our episode. It was really good last week.
And by the way,
So
you know what I love about this picture of you, Robbie? Is, of course, bocce is the Italian game, right, or Italian American game. And what do?
Sure.
They use their hands. And in this picture, you're using your hands like this, like the Italians
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
So I was proud of you. You have a little bit of Italian in you, man.
yeah, for sure. Nice. Well, thank you, Amelia, for your comment. Okay, next one. This video explains bocce so well. It's easy to understand and follow. At Dorothy. Thank you, Dorothy.
Yeah, that's awesome, Dorothy. We tried to make it easy to understand the rules and how to play it and give you some examples, showed you a couple of videos so you can kind of follow it, and even tell you how to go find a set at a local retailer so you can get started.
Yeah, we were trying to thread the needle a little bit with if you had a lot of experience, it wasn't too dumbed down where we try to throw in some of the history that maybe people don't know about, even if they're very experienced players. And we tried to make it, compelling. And then for the new person who's just being introduced to bocce kind of for the first time, we wanted it to be educational enough to where you could understand it. So that was kind of a threading of the needle for us, is trying to speak to both groups of people and everyone in between those groups. So hopefully we were able to do that. But that's a compliment. This video explains bocce so well. It's easy to understand and follow. That would make me believe maybe that person has a little less experience and is appreciative more of the educational side of it. So thank you, Dorothy. Okay, next one. Watching this makes me want to start a bocce league in my area. At Wesley. So thanks, Wesley. What do you think about starting a bocce league, Tommy? Should we call our cousin David?
Let's do it. I mean, Wesley, maybe you can join one of the existing leagues or start your own. Like you said, if you're an entrepreneur, it's a great idea. It's a growing sport, so you'd have a lot of chance to make it successful in your area. Super cool.
Yeah, that was Wesley. Bocce deserves to be more recognized as a serious sport. At Landon.
Yeah, thanks, Landon. I think so too. Like I said before, I'd like to see it in the Olympics. I'd like to see more championships that are on TV so people could actually watch it and see what the sport's all about. So I agree with you.
And last one, nice, short, and sweet. Not bad, gentlemen. At the Bocce Bros.
Yeah, I saw that comment and I just can't thank you guys enough, Bocce Bros. I watch your channel. I've subscribed to your channel too. And thank you for the recognition. I'm glad you watched the episode and enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're so glad to hear from you. Thanks for taking a second to drop us a comment. We're glad that you got to watch it. We hope we did you a little proud in our rendition of that. And thanks for your interest in what we're doing. And that's it.
All right. Well, Robbie, any final thoughts, man, as we head into the weekend? We've got all these Sweet 16 games, these Elite 8 games. We've got lots of new coaches being hired. We still have NFL offseason. I've been seeing more and more mock NFL drafts that are happening. A lot going on.
I think it's crazy to have the transfer portal open in the middle of the tournament, coaches being hired off people's benches
Yeah.
during the tournament. So that's crazy. But, I think that generally speaking, the games have been great. I'm excited about a bunch of these matchups coming up. It's all good teams playing. There's nobody who doesn't belong there. So it's going to be great matchups, exciting basketball. Can't wait to see what's next. And also, it was fun revisiting our bocce episode from last week. So those are
It
my
really
thoughts.
was. That was so much fun. I really had so much fun recording that episode with you and doing all the live footage out on the beach. And that was just a blast. So I'm glad everybody's really loved that episode. It's been great.
Yeah.
Of course, we got also Major League Baseball kicking off on Monday. So watch out for that for your favorite team. And next week, we'll have our weekend recap coming up, and we'll be looking at the weekend games as we get down to the Final Four. So that'll be really fun and exciting to talk about all the great games coming up.
Yep. Baseball starting. That's a good sign.
Absolutely. And we're getting inching closer to our lacrosse trip up to Charlottesville to go see Virginia Duke.
Mm-hmm.
So that's getting closer as well. And we got a lot of great stuff coming your way, guys. So keep tuning in and keep subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, and we'll keep bringing you this great content. We love all your comments that you guys drop for us.
In addition to that, we're starting to inch closer to playoff hockey and playoff NBA. So quite an amazing spring headed our way for all these different sports and events. And we're going to be mixing in some other good content, things like our bocce episode, and we have more things like that on the way. So,
well, guys, enjoy the games this weekend. March Madness on to see what happens in the Sweet 16. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
thank you. See you.